Amy Lopes, Corporate EHS and Risk Director for Chemco Products Company. Amy, a Central Valley native with a combined 22 years of environmental health, safety, food safety, and risk management experience. She has worked in the retail food, food production, and sanitation chemical industries. Amy is currently the EHS and Risk Director for Chemco Products Company and has been a Central Valley Safety Day Committee member since their inception in 2012. Justin Stoker, CSMS, EHS Manager for Aemetis Advanced Fuels. Justin, also a Central Valley native with a combined 17 years of environmental health, safety, and security. He has worked in the food, wine, and renewable fuels industries. In 2014, he achieved his Certified Safety Management Specialist, CSMS, from the Safety Center Incorporated. Justin is currently the EHS Manager for Aemetis Advanced Fuels and has been a Central Valley Safety Day Committee member since 2016.
Hello, everyone. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about hazard communication, safety data sheets, chemical safety, and human physiology during a chemical safety training event. So let's start here. What is hazard communication? Hazard communication is a system for communicating chemical hazards that a person may be exposed to in the workplace. OSHA's hazard communication standard is based on a simple concept that employees have both a need and a right to know about the hazards and the identities of the chemicals they are exposed to in the workplace. Employees also need to know what proactive measures are available to prevent adverse effects from occurring. There are three hazardous groups of chemicals: physical hazards, health hazards, and environmental hazards. GHS, Global Harmonized System. The Global Harmonized System, GHS, is a guideline established by international suppliers, distributors, and end users that utilize safety data sheets and pictograms. In the past, we have utilized material safety data sheets, also known as MSDSs, and they were specific to the United States. However, safety data sheets, SDSs, have replaced the material data sheets. Pictograms and hazards. The GHS system uses 9 pictograms to signify hazards. Over the next series of slides, we will review each pictogram and the hazards associated with them. The first pictogram we'll be reviewing is the health hazard pictogram. The health hazard pictogram alerts you that the chemicals pose a risk to your health if used improperly. This pictogram of a flame shows that the contents are flammable. The flame pictogram alerts you that the substance can burn or ignite, causing a fire or combustion. The exclamation mark pictogram will usually be used in combination with a health hazard pictogram to signify health risks, which are less severe than the skull and crossbones category. When you see this pictogram, it represents an irritant. It could be an irritant to your skin or your eyes. It could be very harmful. It may cause a respiratory irritant and also hazardous to the ozone layer. The gas cylinder pictogram represents gases under pressure. This alerts you to the physical hazards inherent in the use and storage of compressed gases. This pictogram represents corrosive. The product or the material inside the container can be corrosive to metals or even your skin. The corrosion pictogram should prompt you to be especially aware of PPE and storage requirements. Chemicals marked with an exploding bomb pose a significant physical risk and should be treated with extreme caution. This includes explosives, and self-reactants. Chemicals marked with a flame over a circle are strong oxidizers. The skull and crossbones pictogram will usually be used in combination with a health hazard pictogram to signify particularly hazardous chemicals. The environment pictogram, which shows aquatic toxicity or atmospheric toxicity, is a non-mandatory category for safety training because it is regulated by other agencies, but is included here for your information. Information required on labels. GHS requires that there are specific information required on each chemical label. In the next several slides, we will be going through each section. For example, product name, which in this case is dominate, the signal word, which is danger, the description, the example of what dominate is, hazardous statement, a precautionary statement, hazard, and pictograms. As indicated on the previous slide, information required on labels require a signal word. These are words used to indicate the severity of the hazard and alert employees to the potential hazard. Only two signal words will appear. It will be either danger, which is a very severe hazard, or warning, which is a less severe hazard. Not all labels will have a signal word. Some chemicals are not hazardous enough to require that signal word appear on the label. In addition to a signal word, a hazardous statement must also be included on the label. A hazardous statement is a statement assigned to a hazard class and category that describes the nature of the hazard associated with the chemical, including the degree of hazard. So for example, in the first pictogram, the signal word is danger. The hazardous statement is fatal if inhaled. The second example shows a signal word of warning and a hazardous statement of harmful if inhaled. Precautionary statements. Precautionary statements describe recommended measures that should be taken to protect against hazardous exposures or improper storage or handling of a chemical. And of course, pictograms are required on all labels. They are a drawing or a symbol to represent a hazard. There are a total of 9 pictograms, and more than one pictogram can be used on a label. For example, in the first row shows pictograms that are associated with physical hazards, and the bottom row indicates health hazards. Let's discuss safety data sheets. What is a safety data sheet, or also known as an SDS? Safety data sheets provide detailed information and pictograms for chemicals that describe the physical and chemical properties, physical and health hazards, routes of exposure, precautions for safe handling and use, emergency and first aid procedures, and control measures. Information on an SDS helps us to respond effectively to exposure situations. GHS requires that there are 16 sections comprised of an SDS. Over the next few slides, we will go through each section of the SDS. Section 1 is product identification. This section identifies the chemical on the SDS as well as the recommended uses. It also provides the essential contact information of the supplier. Section 2. This section identifies the hazards of the chemical presented on the SDS and the appropriate warning information associated with those hazards. Section 3. Composition information on ingredients. This section identifies the ingredients contained in the product indicated on the SDS, including impurities and stabilizing additives. This section includes information on substances, mixtures, and all chemicals where trade secret is claimed. The required information consists of substances, mixtures, and chemicals where a trade secret is claimed. Section 4, First Aid Measures. This section is absolutely important to understand what first aid measures you need to take in the event you are exposed to the chemical. Section 5, Firefighting Measures. This section provides recommendations for fighting a fire caused by the chemical. Section 6 is Accidental Release Measures. This section provides recommendations on the appropriate response to spills, leaks, or releases, including contaminant and cleanup practices to prevent or minimize exposures to people, properties, or the environment. And then Section 7 is Handling and Storage. This section provides guidance on safe handling practices and conditions for safe storage of chemicals. Section 8, Exposure Controls and Personal Protection. This section will show you exactly what PPE is required when handling the chemical. This section indicates the exposure limits, engineering controls, and personal protective measures that can be used to minimize worker exposure. And Section 9. Section 9 is Physical and Chemical Properties. This section identifies physical and chemical properties associated with the substance or mixtures. Section 10, Stability and Reactivity. This section describes the reactivity hazards of the chemical and the chemical stability information. This section is broken into 3 parts: reactivity, chemical stability, and other. Section 11 is Toxicological Information. This section identifies toxicological and health effects information or indicates that such data are not available. Section 12, Ecological Information. This section is not mandatory. However, it provides information to evaluate the environmental impact of the chemicals if they were released to the environment. Section 13 is also non-mandatory. This section provides guidance on proper disposal practices, recycling or reclamation of the chemical or its containers, and safe handling practices. To minimize exposure, this section should also refer to the reader to Section 8, Exposure Controls and Personal Protection of the chemical. Section 14, Transportation Information. This section provides guidance on classification information for shipping and transporting of hazardous chemicals by road, air, rail, or sea. Section 15 is Regulatory Information. This section identifies the safety, health, and environmental regulations specific for the product that is not indicated anywhere else on the SDS. And the last section, Section 16, is open for other information. This section indicates when the SDS was prepared or when the last known revision was made. The SDS may also state where the changes have been made to the previous version. You may wish to contact the supplier for an explanation of the changes. And remember, SDSs must be on hand for at least 30 years. Now that was a lot of information. But most importantly, I want you to know Section 4 and Section 8. Again, Section 4 is First Aid Procedures. Know what to do in the event you are exposed to a chemical. And Section 8, Personal Protective Equipment. What PPE is required when handling the chemical. Know what PPE to wear prior to handling the chemical. First aid procedures when in contact with chemicals. If you get chemicals in your eyes, get to an eye wash safety shower station immediately. At a minimum, flush eyes for 15 minutes and follow SDS's first aid requirements. Seek medical treatment immediately following an eye flush. If you get it on your skin, get to an eye wash safety shower immediately. Remove clothing and flush affected area for 15 minutes. Seek medical treatment if needed. And note, for anhydrous ammonia, Exposure to eyes or skin, flush and rinse for a minimum of 30 minutes. That's right, a minimum of 30 minutes, no less than. Personal protective equipment. Additional PPE may be required when handling chemicals. As a good rule of thumb, ensure you are wearing the following: chemical-resistant gloves, chemical splash goggle face shield combination, chemical-resistant apron, appropriate footwear, and an APR or respirator when required. More chemical handling tips. Before moving any chemical containers, example 5-gallon jugs, day drums, 55-gallon drums, or totes, make sure the containers are capped. All chemical container pumps and hand pumps must be labeled with contents. If a chemical container does not have an appropriate label, notify your supervisor immediately. When filling a chemical jug, ensure that the vent is open for proper ventilation. And of course, always wear your pant legs over your boots. Your right to know. Safety data sheets are available for every hazardous chemical or substance used as a part of your job. They are always readily available for your review. If you do not know where your SDSs for your areas are kept, please ask. Do you know where your SDSs are located? For the next part of this presentation, I'd like to introduce Justin Stoker. Justin will be talking to you today about chemical awareness and chemical physiology.
I'm going to talk a little bit about chemical awareness and how they can affect your body. There are two types of exposures, acute and chronic. Acute exposure is a short contact with a chemical. It may last a few seconds or a few hours. For example, it might take a few minutes to clean windows with ammonia, use nail polish remover, or spray a can of paint. The fumes someone might inhale during these activities are examples of acute exposures. The risks could be respiratory irritation, eye irritation, which is burning of your eyes, skin irritation, burning or itching of the skin, headache, lightheadedness, shortness of breath, chest tightness, nausea. Along with that could be chronic exposures, is a continuous or repeated contact with a toxic substance over a long period of time. Could be even hours, months, or years. If a chemical is used every day on the job, the exposure would be chronic. Over time, some chemicals, such as PCBs and lead, can build in the body. Risks can be chemicals that bioaccumulate then trigger acute response. Low dosage over long periods produce risk. Hazards producing cancer, organ failure, respiratory issues, and neurological disorders. One way chemicals have an effect on your body is on your brain and nervous system. Examples could be exposure to pesticides, mercury, lead, solvents, carbon monoxide gas. Another way chemicals have an effect on your body is in your lungs, by the dust, fumes, mist, and vapor that we have in our workplaces can cause lung damage. Working with anhydrous ammonia can cause pulmonary edema. Asbestos can cause lung cancer. Welding fumes can cause COPD. Sulfur dioxide could be damage to your lung tissue, decrease lung function, vocal cord spasms, and breathing paralysis. Chlorine can cause pulmonary edema, upper airway changes, lower blood pressure, lower pH levels. Other issues could occur with chemical exposures are bronchitis, laryngitis, and even the worst, death. Another way chemicals have an effect on your body is on your skin. Skin contact is the most common type of exposure to chemicals. They can have temporary or permanent effects. Allergic contact dermatitis could occur when you're working with nickel, latex, chromate. Irritant contact dermatitis could be when you're working with solvents, detergents, oils, lubricants, and chlorine. It could have temporary damage of your skin, which could be the drying of the skin, irritation changes. Permanent damage to your skin would be eating of the skin color changes, and even skin cancer. What do you need to know? Be aware of how your skin can be exposed. It could be exposed through direct contact with liquids, including spills and splashes, contact with vapors, sprays, and mist, contact with contaminated surfaces. You should know the names of the chemicals you work with and obtain information about those chemicals. Read labels and information provided by the manufacturer. Contact your supervisor or the safety department and refer to the safety data sheets, SDSs. Learn which chemicals can cause adverse health effects following exposures. At most, you should try to eliminate the chemical if at all possible, or substitute the chemical. Another way chemicals have an effect on your body is in other internal organs, which can be exposed and damaged, such as liver damage, exposures to vinyl, chloride, or alcohol. Bladder damage could be exposures to some azo dyes, arsenic, etc. Another way chemicals have an effect on your body is in your blood and bone marrow. Examples could be working with benzene in petrol fumes can cause anemia and leukemia, or hydrofluoric acid can cause bone damage or even bone loss. So we just talked about how chemicals affect the body, but what are the routes these chemicals can enter our bodies? One exposure route is inhalation through your eyes, nose, and throat. You can have acute symptoms such as dryness, irritation, soreness, or pain when working with acid, mists, and vapors, welding fumes, or diesel exhaust. You can also have chronic effects such as pulmonary edema when working with anhydrous ammonia. Ensure you are always wearing your proper PPE when working with chemicals. Another route of exposure is absorption through your eyes or skin. Some chemicals can cause damage to your skin and eyes through irritation, allergic reaction, burns, etc., or pass through the skin through absorption into the body through your epidermis, dermis, or hypodermis. Another exposure route is ingestion. Workplace chemicals may be swallowed accidentally if foods or hands are contaminated. They may also be swallowed if contents of containers are not properly labeled and accidentally drank. Some of your work surfaces may have traces of chemicals, and even your hands may have traces of chemicals that you were previously handling a chemical. Another route is injection. Injection can occur when a sharp object, such as a needle, punctures the skin and injects a chemical directly into the bloodstream. Also, with compressed air can cause an embolism. Do not use an air hose to dust yourself off. Use a brush.
Now it's time to test your knowledge.
What are the three groups of hazards? Physical, health, environmental. How many pictograms are within the GHS? 9. What does this pictogram represent? An irritant. What is one of the two signal words that must be on a chemical label? Warning or danger. What is an SDS? Detailed information about the chemical. How many sections to an SDS? There are 16 sections. What is in section 4? First aid procedures. What information can be found in section 8? Personal protective equipment, PPE. Where can you find your company's SDS? Contact your supervisor for location or your safety department. What are 4 ways chemicals can enter your body? Inhalation, eyes, orifices, absorption, ingestion, and injection.